There's one thing that all the Brexiteers very much they clearly did, was that they lied to the British people about the real benefits of Brexit and what they were about to lose, and of course they lied about the future that the UK will have outside the European Union. This is not one of sunny lit uplands and massive green fields and, wonderful, quote, global trading. Like I say, we already did lots of global trade anyway, just that we had the EU and 27 other countries to back up our negotiating power. Now, we're just an island nation that is negotiating by ourselves, and we don't have a lot to offer to the rest of the world. But, that's the truth. But Brexiteers spun multiple lies about how fantastic it would be, and of course that the damage wouldn't be there. There would be no damage, we wouldn't see any of it. But, it'll be fantastic, unicorns for everyone. And of course, the closer we get to January, the more and more desperate they are to try and keep those realities going. But, of course, these realities cannot last forever, because when reality meets fantasy, reality always wins. And the reality is that Brexit is going to be incredibly bad for this country. So, let's get into this then. This comes from the New Statesman. As the UK heads for a no deal, the Brexiteers' delusions have been exposed. Remember all the Brexiteers' promises in 2016. Do you seriously believe that the EU would put tariffs against the UK produce of any kind, when they know how much they want to sell us their cake, their champagne, their cheese from France? It is totally and utterly absurd, Boris Johnson proclaimed. The day after we vote to leave, we hold all the cards, Michael Gove declared. A free trade agreement with the EU should be one of the easiest in human history, Liam Fox bragged. Our EU neighbours would be clamouring over themselves to secure a free market trade deal with their biggest market, Matthew Elliott, the former head of Vote Leave campaign, assured us. 4.5 years on, Britain is on the cusp of a catastrophic no-deal Brexit, as the government plays a perilous game of brinkmanship by threatening to guillotine talks unless the EU makes further concessions. And we are barely 70 days away from leaving the world's largest trading bloc without any agreements to replace all those immensely complex trade agreements built up over the past 47 years. It's all the EU's fault, of course. They want continued ability to control our legislative freedoms, our fisheries. In that way, it is obviously unacceptable to an independent country. They have refused to negotiate seriously, Johnson complained in his Downing Street statement on the 16th of October. But the Prime Minister's finger-pointing overlooks that he did much to sour the atmosphere by likening the EU's political project to that of Nazi Germany, and declaring its leaders that Theresa May's government triggered Article 50 of its own volition, and then wasted 2 years to agree its own negotiating stance. And in that July of last year, Johnson replaced Ollie Robbins, our chief negotiator, with an inexperienced and aggressive Brexiteer, Dave Frost, and that Britain rejected the EU's offer to extend the 1-year transition period that ends on the 31st of December, and that Johnson squandered valuable EU trust last month by threatening to renege on last year's withdrawal agreement. Beyond that, did the Brexiteers not foresee that the EU might not easily give in to the UK's demands? Is it not the job of politicians to anticipate the potential adversity and consequences of their actions? Did they not understand that securing continued tariff-free access to the single market would inevitably require the UK to accept the EU's rules? Did they really believe that Brussels was going to reward us for leaving the EU with a free trade agreement as advantageous as our present position? As Johnson's father Stanley observed in August, anyone who thought who thought so was living in cloud cuckoo land. A deal, albeit a skeletal one, is still somewhat possible, though time is now desperately short. The divide between the two sides on the outstanding issues, primarily state aid and fishings, is not unbridgeable. The strict state aid rules that we now want loosened were fought for by Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. Having won last year's general election by boasting of his oven-ready deal and his ability to, quote, get Brexit done, Johnson would very much like a deal that he could portray as a victory for his tough negotiating stance, and that he was careful not to rule out further talks in his statement. But the EU may very well decide to stand firm and call Johnson's bluff, knowing that trading on Australian-style terms, the government's euphemism for a no-deal Brexit, and one that ignores that Australia is currently seeking a free trade deal with the EU, could hurt the UK far more than its 27 member states. That is also a high-risk tactic, because Johnson reached number 10 by defying and demonising the EU, not capitulating to its demands. Moreover, he remains in thrall to his party's Brexit zealots, who want the cleanest of breaks with Europe and seem to believe that the public would not notice the additional havoc of a no-deal Brexit amid the turmoil of the COVID-19 pandemic. There is also an alarming scope for miscalculation here, and the stakes could hardly be higher. The government's own contingency planners fear shortages of food, medicine and fuel, and civil unrest in the event of a no-deal Brexit. They predict chaos at our ports and queues of over 7,000 lorries waiting to cross the channel. Businesses are already reeling from the coronavirus lockdown and would face devastating tariffs, quotas and red tape and disrupted supply lines, and few have made the necessary preparations. The financial sector, which accounts for 6.8% of the UK's GDP, will lose passporting, systems which permits it to provide seamless financial services to the EU. We might save a few fishermen, but our beef and sheep farmers would go bust. The case for Scottish independence would receive another powerful boost. In the longer term, analysis by the London School of Economics and the UK in a Changing Europe shows the economic damage of a no-deal Brexit could be 2 or 3 times worse than that of the coronavirus, cutting 8% from the UK's GDP over the next decade. A solitary trade deal with Japan, where are all the others that were promised, hardly begins to compensate for the disruption of trade barriers and by the bloc that presently accounts for 43% of our exports and 51% of our imports. Just as Johnson promised a quick and easy trade deal back in 2016, he now insists that the UK will prepare for a no-deal Brexit with high hearts and complete confidence, and that it will, quote, prosper mightily as an independent trading nation. He says 2021 will be a year of renewal and recovery. The Confederation of British Industry, along with 71 other British trade and professional organisations representing sectors ranging from aviation and agriculture to cars, chemicals and pharmaceuticals, does not share this groundless optimism and reckless indolence and of the irrelevant gambler in number 10. They issued a joint statement on the 18th of October demanding historical political leadership because a swift trade deal matters greatly for lives and livelihoods. They added almost plainly, after 4 years of debate, there must be a resolution. And that's, once again, where we are. Who knows what happens next? But I tell you now, a lot of these British industries are not going to be impressed with Johnson. They are not going to be impressed, especially if he does decide to play this ridiculous game of brinkmanship and ends these talks. Now, obviously, the EU's deadline for these talks is the end of October, because that is the last possible point that stuff could be agreed and at least be passed through the EU Parliament to be in place by the time for the end of the transition period. So, once again, we're in that position of we just got to wait and see. But we are literally the unicyclist riding on the edge of the cliff edge, just, and it's a terrifying position to be in, because there's a 50-50 chance we could fall off and just go over the cliff edge, or we could get really lucky and fall onto the normal ground, and at least we'd still be damaged, but at least we wouldn't have gone off the cliff edge. At least there was some way to salvage ourselves. But once again, we'll have to wait and see what Johnson does, because, terrifyingly, Johnson is the only one who knows whether or not what he wants. And that's the truly terrifying thing.